This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Welcome to DWS View. Stand up. If we do not stand up for what we believe, who will? This is Dolores Williams. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing once again a dear friend, Mrs. Ruth Weiss of the Election Integrity Project. Ruth is the go-to person if you want to know anything about voting and anything about infractions and cheating and all that stuff that's going on with voting. Ruth Weiss is the person to go to. And so today I want to welcome Ruth Weiss as my guest, and please help me welcome Ruth Weiss, our friend.
Thank you, Dolores.
Hi, Ruth. How are you doing today?
Great, thank you. It's so good to be with you again.
Oh, great, great. I can't wait for you to share this great information with my audience. And before I do that, let me give kudos to my team. Kim Yater and Liam Watkins. They are the bomb. They are a great team, and they really, really, really do an excellent job of putting these podcasts together. So I need to recognize them before we get started because they're awesome. And now, Ruth, we're going to go ahead and get started. And the first thing I want to ask you is, please tell us about EIPCA, this great organization.
Thank you, Dolores. We are now about to complete our 10th year of work for the California voter to try to restore and then defend the integrity of the elections here in California. We're a nonpartisan and nonprofit organization, a 501c3, and we only have in mind trying to make sure that every lawful individual has the right to vote unimpeded and uninfluenced, and that those votes then would be counted accurately. We do it through research and through communication with our elections officials all across the state, but we also do it through citizen involvement, and that's what we're really knee-deep in right now, is training. Thousands, literally thousands of people have signed up for our trainings to be citizen observers, both at the registrar's office to watch the processing of the vote by mail ballots that come in, and also those who will observe at the polling locations where in-person votes are being cast. And so it's a very, very chaotic time for voters, for politicians, and certainly for organizations like ours that are trying to make sure that everything stays as honest and fair as possible.
Well, I tell you, you know, our city and our state is blessed to have your organization out there. I mean, without your organization, things would be a lot different in this state and other states as well. Now, tell me, Ruth, how is COVID-19 going to affect the elections this year?
It's going to have a very, very large effect, unfortunately, not because of COVID-19, but because the way the politicians have reacted to it and the way in which the politicians and some of the bureaucrats have used that as an excuse to take more power than they are entitled to. And that's the big concern that we have. The governor came out with an executive order that was later slapped down by the courts because he was not entitled to do what he did, because it was the legislative branch of government that had the right to do that, and he's executive. But then the legislators came up behind him and passed the same law, basically, and that meant that every single person on the active voter lists in the state of California was going to automatically be mailed a vote by mail ballot for this election, even though they may not have requested one. And the problem with that is that the voter rolls are not clean. We have well over 500,000 people who we know have to either be deceased or long moved out of the state of California. We have not heard from them in decades, and yet they will all have a ballot mailed to their last known address. And that puts a lot of ballots out there for people to scoop up and, you know, off of the top of mailbox deliveries places and everywhere else. And those people who are unscrupulous will have the opportunity to abuse those ballots. And it's very, very easy to get a ballot counted, even if you're not the original voter, for a myriad of reasons. And recently, and as recently as today, and I'm sure there will be more, the Secretary of State has taken the opportunity to change a lot of the regulations. Well, actually, he's putting out regulations intending to change the law. He can't do that. It's unconstitutional. We are hoping to file a lawsuit against him, but he was very wise to do it with the kind of timing that meant that there's no way a legal challenge can be levied against him in time to make a difference. And so it will be ex post facto that he gets found to have acted unconstitutionally and get his hands slapped. But these are big regulations, and they're saying, well, it's because of COVID, but many of them have nothing to do with COVID. They have to do with, okay, the window's open for us to take power that we're unentitled to, and we're going to do it. So he's coming down with regulations that are changing signature verification rules to make it almost impossible for a ballot to be determined not from the original voter. Even though we have that protection already in place through the curing process, where no ballot can be rejected until the voter is contacted and has a chance to verify that that's their signature. Nevertheless, these regulations the Secretary of State is putting down, which conflict with the actual California law. So that's why he can't do it. He can't take a regulation and upend a law that's on the books, but he's doing it and saying, well, we're making it so easy to get a signature through that basically they can't throw anything out. And then the other way that he's impacting us very directly is these regulations are coming down, giving the registrars very open doors to pretty much impede the citizens' right to observe the process and make a difference through citizen oversight. So we are really struggling with that right now. We are fighting back both legally and in terms of informing voters about it. We are training our observation teams to say, just as they did in the civil rights movement in the 60s, don't let them push you away. Keep going back, keep going back. Let them know that they can't steamroller you. We're going to be civil and we're going to be sweet about it, but we'll keep showing up until they realize that we're not going to go away. So because of them having this COVID excuse, they have pushed things to the limit and beyond. And so we are in a very difficult situation right now in California. And I'm assuming the same sort of thing in other states.
Well, that's terrible. So there's no emergency thing that the lawyer, anything by emergency that the lawyers can do to combat or to confront him?
No, the legal system works slowly, and it takes time to create those injunctions. It takes time for the court to take them up. And another thing that we're facing is that the courts are still working at a very slow pace right now because they have a very limited schedule, again, saying that COVID is the reason. We can still go anywhere we want to eat out, or we can go to buy groceries or to Walmart or all that stuff, but somehow it's not safe to vote and it's not safe to have the courts operating. So I think this is a real opportunity for the establishment to just take control and tell the people, hey, we're going to control your lives. So the people need to make it known that they're not happy with this and that they are not going to let themselves be steamrollered.
Wow. So this is also another reason why the voter rolls need to be cleaned up in this state. And not just this state, but other states as well, where we have dead people voting and dogs and cats voting, all these kind of examples of things that are happening in voting that are unethical and just not right.
And we're hearing it all the time. And yet the people who are on the other side just ignore it and say there's no evidence at all, but there's lots of evidence. And we have, now that ballots have gone out in other states and in California, we are just inundated on a daily basis with emails and phone calls from people who have received ballots for, one I got from someone who said, well, I got a ballot for a lady who lived here for 3 months 10 years ago. And she's, moved to another state and been voting there for years. Now, all of a sudden, she gets a ballot in California because she was one of those people on the list that was just lying there inactive that they did not remove. And now that they're mailing a ballot to everybody, here it goes out to her at an address that she doesn't live anymore and hasn't for 10 years. I've received emails from people saying, in fact, just one this morning in Los Angeles County, of someone who said, I received a ballot for this individual. This individual was here on a J1 visa as a student visa from France. 10 years ago, she went back to France. She never applied for citizenship. She never applied to vote. Now she's getting a ballot in Los Angeles County mailed to this gentleman's address. There's just all kinds of that kind of report going on. And then we're seeing reports coming out, even one today that came out in San Diego County, that they're finding mail, including ballots, just dumped somewhere, apparently by a person who worked for the Postal Service who didn't feel like doing the job, so he just dumped it in a dumpster somewhere and pretended he had delivered the mail. That just came out today, and we're hearing that almost every day. We hear a similar story from somewhere. So this whole idea that voting by mail works is just ridiculous. It does not work. Citizens need to step up and vote in person, unless they are the very few who need the exception of voting by mail because they're unable to go to the polls. Because as long as everybody just has a ballot mailed out to them, it's complete chaos, and there's just no way to say that there's any integrity in that process.
Yeah, and with the voting and ballots, I'm hearing about that myself, about ballots being found in different places, where in the trash, in rivers, in ditches, and all over the place. So with that problem happening, what can be done legislatively by, I know the Congress is not going to do it because they're in favor of all of this nonsense, but in the future, what can we do to shore up our ballot rolls nationwide so that we have ID and so that we have in-person voting, just like we can go to the store and we can do all these other things in person. We can vote in person, and I will be voting in person. I will not be voting by turning in my ballot. I will not do that. So
well, I'm glad you said what you just said, Dolores, because every single person in the state of California, almost every single person, has the right to vote in person, regardless of whether they've received a vote by mail ballot or not. And when we always have, and we do this election too. So, and taking your ballot and turning it in at the polls, or taking your ballot and turning it at the registrar's office, is not voting in person. It is still turning in a vote by mail ballot that has to be processed and handled and going through so many different departments where things could go wrong by mistake or intentionally, that it's not worth subjecting your ballot to that process. What we mean by vote in person is take your ballot with you to a polls when the poll is open and surrender it. Go to your own polling location, surrender that ballot, have them mark the ballot surrendered so no one else can use it, and then vote on a same day ballot that day. That's called voting in person, and that's the safe ballot. And that's what we're trying to encourage people to do. But we have heard in California for 22 years so much propaganda about how wonderful voting by mail is and how safe it is and how this and how that we have slowly gotten to the point where at least 70% of us are voting by mail on a regular basis because we don't know what's wrong with it. And we just say, oh, well, maybe it's easier. Or and people who think it's even safer. It's not. It's not. And we need to turn that ship around. We need to get people to understand what their ballots are subjected to before they can possibly be counted, and let them realize that the obligation of a citizen is to get up off their couch and go and vote. And this year you have at least 4 days to do it in almost every county. The polls are going to be open for starting on Halloween, and in some counties even earlier than that. They're going to be consolidated polling places where you will have a larger number of precincts assigned to a single location, which is why they expanded the dates that you can vote in person. We really encourage people to do that. In terms of what we can do about it for the future, we have to be really careful and walk a line. We don't want the federal government to get too involved in telling us how we have to hold elections, because the Constitution gives the election process over to the states. However, the federal government has passed two national laws called the National Voter Registration Act and the Help America Vote Act, both of which were to make sure that access to registration and voting is wider and more convenient, so that there is no one in the United States who would have an impediment to being able to register and to vote if they want to. And part of both of those laws indicated that voter rolls have to be kept clean. So what do we do about that? Well, the DOJ is not doing their job. They are supposed to be making sure that these two laws, because they're federal laws, are followed. And every election cycle and every time in between, we have a lot of organizations out there that are studying voter rolls on a regular basis. They are filing legal letters with these counties and with these states and saying, you know, your voter rolls are out of compliance. You've got 90 days to fix it or we're going to sue you. Even the ones that have been sued and lost, as we did in California, suing LA and the Secretary of State, then they don't follow through and do what they're supposed to do with the consent decree. And then it takes a lot of money to take them back to court and make them comply because the DOJ is not doing their job. Now, personally, and I'm not speaking for EIPCA here, but personally, I would like to see a nationwide photo ID requirement passed. And that would mean that the government would, of the states, would have to help people get that photo ID, so it's no impediment to anybody who might have a difficult time with it. But that is going to cut down so much on the difficulties. And the other thing that needs to happen is that states like California and quite a few others need to pull back on the universal no excuse vote by mail and go back to everybody votes in person unless they have applied for and deserved and received an absentee ballot, which is controllable. Until we do those two things, it can't go back to where we can have a good comfort level with the integrity of our process.
Well, that would mean it would be intentional cheating and stealing elections. So that's the whole purpose of doing what they're doing with the ballot harvesting. Now, I understand that the state of California changed the date of the number of days that people have to actually get their ballots in.
A lot of states are doing that, again, saying, oh, well, COVID is going to slow down the mail. Now, I don't know whether that's accurate or not, but California generally says your ballot has to be postmarked by election day, but we can receive it 3 days after election day and still count it. Then for this election, they extended that and said it has to be postmarked by election day, but we'll take it 17 days late. Now, other states have expanded their reception time too, but California is by far the longest after election day that is going to accept ballots. That extends the amount of time that it will take for them to give us election results. It extends the amount of time for fraud to take place, because that law that says it has to be postmarked by election day also says, oh, if it's not postmarked, or if we can't read the postmark, then we'll go by the date that the voter puts on the inside. So you can watch the results come in for 10, 11, 12, 13 days, figure out where a few more votes would matter the most. You take those ballots that you've scooped up that went to people that don't exist, and you fill them out, and you find a way to get them in without a postmark. And believe me, people who are unscrupulous know how to do this and make it appear that they're legitimate. And then you just put, you know, whatever date you want to on the inside, and no one can question those ballots, and suddenly you've manipulated an election. And that can be all the way from water board all the way up to, you know, the president and everything, but mostly it's going to affect local politics, all the way, you know, Senate, Congress, and then down through the city councils and boards of supervisors. That's where that situation is going to be mostly able to be manipulated, and it's very frightening.
Oh, it certainly is. And with the number of races that we have here, even in San Diego County, that are going to be close. And when we look at Orange County, where a lot of those votes were manipulated and ballot harvesting played a big part, and a lot of people winning races, and then overnight losing those races. So that is very dangerous for this country to go along this path. And something will have to be done before our next major election to make some changes.
Well, I hope so. There's a law that Arizona passed making ballot harvesting a felony, and that's been challenged in court by the Democrat Party. And it is now, so we participated, Election Integrity Project California participated with our Arizona team, because we do have Election Integrity Project Arizona also. And we participated in helping them to get that appeal to go all the way up to the Supreme Court. So we just heard yesterday that the Supreme Court will hear that appeal. Now, if Arizona is given the right to make their own election laws and to let that law stand, that's going to be encouraging for other states. But if they rule against Arizona and say Arizona doesn't have a right to make ballot harvesting illegal, then that's going to have major implications across 50 states. It means that every state is going to now have to allow ballot harvesting. And if you're doing it California style, which now Nevada put in an emergency law that for this election is going to allow California style ballot harvesting, and several other states that are doing the same thing, you're going to wind up with complete and total chaos, because there is no control. Anybody, regardless of who they are, they can be underage, they can be non-citizens, they can be anybody, can collect as many ballots as they can, you know, convince people to give them. And that means you go to the low information voter, you go to the people who don't really care, you get them to register and turn over their ballot, you get them to sign it, and then you can fill it out any way you want to. And that's ballot harvesting in California. That's how it happened in 2018. So it's not just helping people to vote who otherwise might not be able to vote. That's ridiculous. There's not a person on this planet that wouldn't be able to vote if he wanted to, the way that California has the laws set up. But instead, we've got to go door to door and wrest the ballots out of their hands. And we have to go to what happened in the Central Valley, to farms that employ nothing but green card workers, and bring those workers together on their break and tell them that they have a right to vote and get them registered, and then bring their ballots back to them already filled out, ask them to sign them, and then turn them in. So you're manipulating a population that doesn't know any better, and they're harming themselves in the process. And all of that is ballot harvesting in California. And there are no regulations, no way of determining who's collecting how many ballots or who turned them in. It's chaos. Nobody in their right mind would think that this is a good idea, but California did. And then other states are following through on that, because whatever happens in California that manages to work, and this one certainly did work, then other states start picking it up and pushing it through. And it's just unbelievable and mind-boggling that it's moving like a wildfire across other states. And again, it's the COVID that is being used as the cover here. Oh, we have to do this because of COVID, which is totally ridiculous.
Well, COVID is taking on a life of its own. In addition to being a pandemic and causing a lot of people health issues, COVID is just being used as a tool. And it's shameful what the Democrat Party is doing to exploit our voting system. And if they had any integrity, they would not be going to these lengths to win elections and to steal elections. Now, the case that went to the Supreme Court, is that before the Supreme Court right now, or is that in the future?
No, well, I don't know when that ruling is supposed to come down, but I would hope they would do it on an emergency basis, because it is going to impact this election. So we're hoping to get a ruling. And make no mistake about it, COVID's a real thing, and it's killing some people, and it's making a lot of people sick, and we don't discount that. But at the same time, over a month, I think it was like 2 months ago now, the World Health Organization announced that it doesn't meet the standards for being called a pandemic. It doesn't even meet the standards anymore for being called an epidemic. And so we're still calling it a pandemic when it doesn't meet those standards. It's still a virus that's out there, and people can pass from one to the other, just like the flu and colds and everything else. For some people, which is a very minor slice of the population, it's a severe infection. For everybody else, it's a minor inconvenience and they get over it. And we have been driven by fear and fear mongering to do stuff that is just unimaginable, using COVID as an excuse for it.
Yeah, well, the scary thing is that the citizens are going along with it.
Yep.
And that's what's scary to me, is that people who are not even paying attention to the rights that they have. I don't downplay COVID. Yeah, it's real, and it is harmful to some people, but it is being used as a tool to keep people in line. I looked at the Jewish people in New York, how they're being threatened with only having 10 people in their synagogues. And if they don't go along with that, then the governor and the mayor, they're threatening to shut down the synagogues in New York.
And shut them down permanently. I mean,
Yeah.
It's awful what some of these governors are doing. It's outrageous. We'll only keep our liberties if we fight for them. And fear is a powerful thing. And they managed to get a hold of the narrative and make everybody so scared beyond any sense of reality about this disease, and they're doing things that will never, ever make a difference. Wearing a mask is not going to protect you, because the mask can't keep out something as small as a virus. The virus goes right through it. So masks are very effective for larger things like bacteria and pollen and dust and ashes for the fires and stuff like that, but they are not going to protect you from COVID. And now you've got people all around you. Every day you see people putting on a mask to get in their car all by themselves and drive with a mask on. They are compromising their immune system to do that because of the fear that they've been able to be driven to. And once you're afraid, you're not listening to reason. And the thing that scares me the most here is that this was a test run to see just how quickly American people but using something like fear can be knuckled under and allow their liberties to be taken away. And now
Yes.
that we have this test, it's pretty easy to take people's freedoms away because we've allowed it to happen, because we're not only uninformed, we're misinformed, and that's scary.
Yes, yeah, it is, Ruth. I agree with you. And I think about the church, and I really, that really hurts my heart more than anything when I see the churches that are shut down and closed. They're meeting out in parking lots and fearful to go inside of their buildings and being told that they can't go into the buildings.
And
And
some just
but
not
yet
meeting at all. It's scary.
yeah, I mean, we go inside a Walmart, we go inside of any store to shop, we do all these things, but we can't go into our church buildings. And that kind of, when I think about it, just really bugs me. Now, tell me about your organization and opportunities for people to volunteer. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, citizen oversight for this election is going to be more important than ever before, because our citizen overseers are going to need to show up to let them know, these regulations that are being put into effect by the Secretary of State are unconstitutional and illegal. If you are going to abide by them, then we are going to be standing here letting you know that just exactly the fact that we understand what you're doing, and that down the line you're going to pay for this legally, because this is not something you're allowed to do. We're training our people to go back over and over again, even if they're rejected, even if they're pushed away, even if they are told, okay, you can observe, but you have to observe over here where there's really nothing to see. We've asked our people to go do that anyway and to document that, because all of that becomes evidence so that later on we can take a lot of things to court and make sure this never happens again. But we need our people there. So we have had, over the last 3 weeks, quite a few trainings for people to know what to do, to go down to their counting centers, the ballot counting centers, and to watch everything that happens with vote by mail ballots before they can be counted, all of the processing involved, including signature match and things like that, to make sure that these ballots are being handled as lawfully as possible. And we have had an outpouring like never before. Thousands of people have responded across the state. And because the training has been by Zoom, we've now been able to train people from every county from their own living room couch. And we just completed that training, although another huge mountain of ballots are going to be delivered on election day and in the few days after election day. So on November 4th and 5th, we hope to hold 2 more trainings for that kind of observation for people who missed out in the first round. Starting this coming Tuesday, we are going to be training now people to observe the polling locations, the in-person voting locations that are being set up around the state. And for most counties, it will not look like it normally looks. They will be different. They will be combined precincts. There'll be a lot of things that will confuse voters. But we are trying to spread that word, and we're getting observers out there too. So anybody who wants to go to our website can sign up to be trained to observe the polling locations, and our volunteers go when they can go, where they can go, and for how long they can go. It's up to the observer. But every second that somebody's watching the process, the safer the process is for the voters and for the integrity. So I encourage people to go and sign up for these trainings. They're just getting started, and they will continue until close to the end of the month. And our website is www.E for election, I for integrity, P for project, EIP-CA for California.com. And you just go up to the take action. You have to click on the California, because you're going to get a landing page with all 4 of the states that we represent. You go to the California section and then go up to take action, and you'll see a tab for you to be able to register for a training. And we encourage everybody to do that.
Oh, that's great. Now, Ruth, with all the propositions on the ballot, are you guys involved with any of the propositions? Do you have any views on any of them that you could give insight on?
We are involved only in legislation and propositions that directly affect the integrity of the election process. And in this particular year, there are 2 on the ballot that we got involved in when they were pieces of legislation. We testified in committees. We opposed both of these bills, but they were proposed as constitutional amendments. And so in order to be, they have to be passed by the legislature, but then they have to be on the ballot as propositions, but the people have to approve them. So they are Proposition 17 and Proposition 18, and we have taken a stand against them. And you will see that in the con arguments in the voter information guide that we have written the con arguments for these two propositions. Proposition 17 would give the right for felons who are on parole to have their voting privileges restored before they finish filling out the parole sentence. We're opposed to that because when California did its realignment of criminal justice reform, everybody who committed any kind of a minor crime was suddenly those were downgraded and they're no longer felons. And many felonies were downgraded to be things that would send people to jail instead of prison. So the only people left who lose their voting rights at all are the people who go to prison. If you're in jail, whether it's for a felony or misdemeanor, you never lose your right to vote. You can vote from rights, they're behind the bars. But the people who committed something so heinous that they went to prison, and you're talking about murderers and rapists and child traffickers and child abusers and these really horrible, horrible crimes against humanity. Those are the only people left in California who go to prison, and the only people left in California who do lose their voting rights while they're in prison. The state has a parole system for those people. Parole means you get to get out and try to prove yourself in the real world before you're done with your sentence. Because if you weren't granted parole, you'd still be behind bars. So your sentence is not over. But the state decided to loosen things a little bit, find out if you have decided you want to be a contributing human being that won't do that kind of thing again. But you were under strict supervision by the state and a parole officer that you can't choose where to live or who to talk to or anything, because the state controls that. But somehow with this constitutional amendment, Proposition 17, it would give those people the right to vote. We don't think they're ready for that. We don't think they've had connection with the real world. They haven't proven that they believe now in the social contract, and they're not going to abuse their fellow human beings. So why should they have a say in the taxes I pay and the people who govern me? They shouldn't. So we've taken a stand against that law. And then we've also taken a stand against Proposition 18, which would give 17-year-olds the right to vote in the primary election if they're going to be 18 by the general election. Well, the primary election is now 8 months before the general election in California. And so you're having people barely 17 who are still in high school, who still haven't even taken their government course as a senior, who are under the influence of 5 hours a day at least of people who all belong to a union that's going to be pretty much lockstep in a single direction. They will not get balanced information. They could very well be overly influenced. They could even, because this happens in colleges, the teachers could say, oh, let's do this together. Bring your ballots in. We'll sit and mark them together in class. Oh, and by the way, I'll just collect your ballot from you and turn it in for you. Students are going to feel like they have to do that because otherwise their grade might be in jeopardy. And then the teachers know the students who have been outspoken against some of the ideas that the teachers would like. And it leaves the teachers in complete control of whose ballot to turn in and not turn in. It's a bad idea. Everywhere else in government, 18 is the bare minimum for having adult rights. Like even to go to a tanning bed and get a tan, you have to be 18. In order to buy alcohol or tobacco, you got to be older than that. And why? The reason they give? Well, because they're not fully developed and they don't have a sense of reason and rationality yet, because the brain isn't fully developed, and that's a scientific fact. And they're now arguing that people who are in their teens should not be held accountable to court of law at an adult level for really horrible crimes they commit under the same auspices. But yet all of a sudden we're going to get schizophrenic and say, oh, no, not schizophrenic, actually hypocritical. And we're going to say, oh, but these same people that are so undeveloped that they're still children, we're going to let them vote because we can manipulate the vote that they're going to cast. Bad idea. So we took a stance against both of those propositions on the basis of electoral integrity. And so that's how we feel.
Well, that's great. I'm very happy once again that Election Integrity Project is out there taking a stand, because They
No,
don't have a clue about what's happening in voting and don't even know the rights that they have.
no.
And too many parents don't know what's happening in the schools that are even online. You know, I was talking to one of my friends last week. Her children, she has 4 children, they're home, and what they're learning on the computer is ridiculous. Not only the education, what they're teaching them is not even education. They can actually get into sites on the internet that are not even related to the school. They're not blocked. And so that's a big problem for her. And with 4 children trying to see what they're doing on the computer, and when they see her coming, they hear mom coming, then they switch to something else. So it's a big problem. And our children, there's no reason why our children can't be in school. They should be in school.
Well, I
mean,
certainly agree with that, Laura. Yeah.
I'm thankful for the ones that have access to private schools. And I wish more parents could get their children out of the public schools, because the teachers unions are in control.
Yeah.
And
speaking of schools, what we teach our observers is information every single citizen should have. This is information about the way you vote and how the voting system works and what are the safer ways to vote. Our information should be far and wide, and it should be taught in school. These kids who are 17 and 16 should be given this information in school, so when they are of voting age, they will have a lot more understanding about voting. And that's how you establish a lifelong voter, is by teaching them about the system and how it works and why it's important to be participating. You don't make them into a lifelong voter by allowing them to vote before they're 18, which is the argument that the proponents are giving. That's ridiculous. So I would like to get our curriculum into the schools. It's something that if we can get a larger number of people so that we're not all wearing so many hats, we might be able to start working on an educational portion of what we do to be directed to the emerging adults who are in our high schools.
Well, that's great, because they don't teach civics anymore.
Not really.
So this would be great for our children to learn about the country, learn about the greatness of this country, because America's put down too much. They don't realize the values that they have here, the freedoms that they have here are in jeopardy, but depends on who's in charge. And if you get people in charge who don't respect the laws of this country and don't even care about this country, then we get people who will become dictators. They will want to rule over us and change what we think and dare us to think different.
Well, we've seen incontrovertible evidence of that in the last 6 months, have we not?
Yes, we have.
Absolutely.
Yes, we have.
And how easily a person gets converted into someone who is just wielding power they have no right to wield, just overnight because they can. So
yes.
It's very important to teach our kids what the beauty of this government, the way it's intended to run, and the right to vote equally with anyone else who's a citizen, regardless of who you are, and to have a voice in who governs over you and how they govern, and to vote them out peacefully so you don't have to have revolutions every few years. That is so rare in human history, and we're not teaching our kids how rare that is. And so they just take it for granted, or they just sort of sneer at it, and then they decide that we're bad because the teachers tell them we're bad. And they lose this right, and you don't know what you got till it's gone, said the song. And we don't want that to be the way that our younger generation now learns what they had after the fact. We don't want them to have to fight for it all over again, but we're going to have to educate them into how rare and beautiful this system is when it works right, so they'll step up and help protect it as well.
Yeah, and Ruth, that's why this election on November 3rd truly is one of the most critical in our nation's history, if not the most critical in our nation's history.
Right, and regardless of who wins, Dolores, the important
Yep.
thing is whether people in this country believe it was a fair and honest election and the people who won really did win. Regardless of who wins, there's so much chaos that people are not going to really be able in their hearts to accept the outcome of the election, and it's going to be another 4 years of chaos. And this whole thing started in 2000 with the chaos in Florida, and we have never since that time had peace with the fact that the democratic system worked, somebody lost, somebody won. Okay, we'll come together as Americans and we'll try again in 4 years. We lost that in 2000. It's just ramped up since then. And this is the worst thing that we've had and the most hotly contested election since 1864 in this country. So it's very important to see what direction we go.
Yeah, well, it's by design, Ruth. It's no accident. With the ballot harvesting, mail-in ballots, our opponents, those who stand for that, knew that this would cause havoc and cause a lot of discontention and disheartening, division in our country. It would divide us, just like all the rioting in the streets and those kind of things. And, you know, and I heard that all the charges were dropped against the people who are rioting and burning in the streets. And I mean, they're rioting, they're burning, they're breaking into homes in the suburbs now of innocent people.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they can do that with no consequence.
Right. And unless that changes, we are headed very quickly down the road to anarchy. Yeah. And that's something that you don't recover easily from. No, but there has to be a will on the part of those in charge. It's not something that the president or anyone like that, you can't just send in troops and stop all of this nonsense that's going on. But it has to end, though. It just, our country can't sustain it. So with all the electoral chaos that's been caused by all of these crazy COVID-induced laws and that kind of stuff, we still need to understand that people of faith can step forward and make their voices heard. And if we all get out there and vote our consciences, we will outvote all of this effort to steal elections. We can still outvote the fraud. We can still outvote it all, but we have to show out in mass. We can't go, oh, well, there's no point, I'm just going to throw up my hands. That would be the wrong thing to do. We need to say, the Lord has caused us to be here in this place and time to do his will. And that is to make sure this country survives properly. And so get out and vote.
Thank you, Ruth. And on that note, thank you so much for this time today, Ruth. I thank you for the information that you shared, because it is valuable what you have shared, and we want to get it out to the masses. And our prayer is that a lot of people will listen and take heed and learn and not take this country for granted. Amen. And so I want to thank you. God bless you for coming. And we're just looking forward to getting this information out. And I want to thank you, my audience, those who are listening to this podcast, those who will be listening and watching, because now you can listen or you can watch. And so I want to thank you for coming back and ask you to subscribe. And also, I'm looking for sponsors for these podcasts. If you want to be a sponsor, I would love to have you contact me at dwsviewstandup@gmail.com. Contact me and become a sponsor for this show. And we would love to have you. And once again, welcome to DWS View Stand Up. If we do not stand up for what we believe,